Here we go. Hi, everyone. We're live. Hi, Chris. How are you?
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing great, especially right now that we just started. So, very happy to have a new episode of the Security Break podcast. If this is the first time you're watching this is just a little project of mine where I invite cool people like Chris in this case, and discuss or just have a little chit chat about some recent security news and learn in the process, right? So, just getting information about you know uh, stuff that happens out there from various people with different backgrounds, different knowledge that can definitely teach me something maybe, and hopefully can also teach something to you people that are watching this during the process. Today, I'm really happy to have with me Chris Foulon. Hopefully, that's the right pronunciation. Sorry for that. Not really good with this stuff. Chris, would you mind have a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Chris Foulon's the best introduction that you can say. I've been the host of the Breaking Into Cybersecurity podcast, also here on Twitch. I am a coach. I help cybersecurity leaders grow into their full potential. And then I'm also an InfraGard national chapter region board. So we it's a collaboration between the FBI and commercial interests to share threat intel information. So um, we have some great topics to discuss today.
Yeah, that's great. And by the way, of course, you are definitely more experienced than a senior, I will say, podcaster too. So if you didn't know already, just have a look at the podcast from Chris. And anyway, in case that's not clear already, we're live on Twitch, but I'm going to re-upload the recording, the video recording on YouTube, and also the audio on Spotify and similar platforms. And I will put all the um, links and resources from Chris in the description. So check it out. Okay. Um, so today we have a bunch of news from the last days. There's something older than the last week this time, just because I thought it was interesting to talk about that. So I'm gonna share my screen with them, and we can just introduce it and have a little discussion about it. So here is my screen. Hopefully you can see it. Yeah.
I can.
That's perfect. So, very, very quick introduction. And let's see what is interesting about this piece right here. So, the story is about a major, phishing campaign that was observed by Cofens. You can see right here. Um, where the particularity of this campaign here was that there was a huge usage of QR codes in the emails that constitute the initial access of the attacks in this case, right? So what we are talking about, we already mentioned multiple times in this podcast what is phishing, or just I mean to um, convince people to click on a malicious link or download a malicious attachment in order to break into the defenses of an organization. And in this specific case, in order to we say evade the security measures, right, of the companies receiving the phishing attack, because today we have various solutions that actually scan the email before letting the user read the email, right? To evade that kind of security measure, they are actually putting an image or a PDF document in this case with a QR code in it. So QR codes are just this, you can see some examples in the screen. This kind of new, I would say new way is not really new, but always more used nowadays with the a code, an image code that you can actually scan with an app, usually on your mobile phone, to reach to a link, to reach to a website or something, instead of having to put down, type in the URL yourself. So it's actually easier, okay, to get in there. That's the reason why we're using it. But at the same time, the user is not really looking at the URL that they are going to open, right? And this is an advantage for the attackers. So the news is interesting because we've seen this kind of thing used in the past, but this is pretty big. It's talking about thousands of email targeting multiple organizations in the United States mainly. And again, I just thought that maybe it's not that clear why QR codes could be used in a malicious way, and why people should have double checked them before opening everything. We in the industry always say to everyone, double check your links before you click on them. But what about there's no link to click on? You actually have something to scan with the QR code, right? um, what's your first?
Yeah, what I'd say is first the QR codes are presented in a non-traditional way. So
Mhm.
typically QR codes are squares. Here they're using crosses to make it seem like the security companies, here they're emulating Microsoft, are using it in a different way. And what this does for the user is it breaks down their defenses so that they think that this isn't the traditional QR code that anyone could create, but it
Mhm.
is. And then, like you were mentioning, you can't see the link. So, like a shortened link, this is a longer link that's hidden in the QR code. But what you can see when you scroll a little bit higher in the article is that uh, they're hiding their link behind a Bing search.
Yeah.
So when you initially look at the link, actually scroll lower. When you look at the link, if you were to look at it, you would see a Bing search, which is very similar to Microsoft. Microsoft owns Bing. So because of that, you would think that you're very closely related, but you're not. The malicious parts hiding at the end in a base 64 encryption. So for those that don't understand a base 64 encryption, it is manipulating it into machine readable language that the search engine would understand, but you might not understand unless you decode it.
Yeah, we're actually observing multiple levels, all of which are just trying to evade security measure, or just the user to understand where I'm actually going to, right? I see, first of all, the QR code, so it's just a random image. I can, as a human, I cannot really interpret it. I scan it, then it redirects me to what it seems to be a random search engine, search with a proper or legit domain. In this case, the example in the screen, we have bing.com, and it actually redirects you to the actual legit, malicious domain, which is, as you mentioned, um, obfuscated in base 64. So it's really taking efforts, right, to make you not understand where are you going. Because I was about to say that which is a way that we can make sure QR codes are safe before actually reaching the targets. And I don't know, I would say just double check the app you use to scan the QR codes, because some of them, instead of just redirecting you, actually show you the final link, and ask you, are you sure you want to go to this link right here, right? But in this specific case, still, I think that the app will just show you the Bing search. So again, just having a look at it, it's not enough to determine, okay, this is safe, I can actually click on it, right? So
And it also fooled Microsoft for until they started to see that this was actually leading to phishing, because they use similar automated methods to
mm,
look at the URL, and usually they look at the first portion of the URL, because typically at the end you might put things like social media references, things like that, and hide them in the URL. And it doesn't affect what the URL is, it's just used for tracking. And so Microsoft overlooked that, and many initial security measures would have overlooked that as well until it gets flagged as a malicious URL.
yeah, it's very tricky, and I think the attackers put some research behind this, right, before actually um, uh, you know um, running this campaign right here. And another thing that I was thinking, it's really straightforward, right? But I like to reiterate on this. No matter how we improve on the security industry, no matter how many technologies we implement, or how new vulnerabilities are discovered, or everything, anyway, phishing is always one of the main attack vectors that are going to be used, just because they are effective, right? They just find a new way to social engineer someone, right? Or just a new technique like this one. But still, the essence of it is still phishing. They are still sending you an email, and they're just trying to fool the user into making the wrong step, because that's the fact. Most of the attacks, I would say, probably, yeah, most of them really requires the users to do a first step, right? To click on something, to give permissions to some executable, or anything like that. And without that step, attackers cannot really get in without further efforts, right? So this is just the most simple way to get into an organization. If you can, fool someone into giving you the keys to the kingdom, it's just great for the attackers, of course, a little less for organizations. And this makes me think, right? No matter how much we can improve, still the first and old way of fooling humans, right, is the best way to breach defenses, right? Like, is there a way we will ever find a way to prevent this? I honestly don't think
Well,
so.
I don't think we'll ever prevent humans from clicking on links. But what we can do is we could put the human in an environment in which when they click on the link, they're not affected. So
Hmm.
that could be a virtual environment. That could be multiple layers of protection that even if they did click, it has a DNS tool that prevents it from going there. It has other tools prevent it from executing, different ways of stopping the phishing link or the phishing attempt from being fully executed. So in this case, because you're using a QR code, you're actually bypassing the click. So now you're using the user's iPhone or Android device and getting them to go to the login page. So all your corporate defenses are usually down. So
Hmm.
at that point, you're looking at, okay, if I were a defender, what can I do? And in this case, it could be things like impossible travel. My user is based in the US, but when they click with this QR code, you're logging in from Iraq or Ukraine. And it shows that within seconds you're trying to do that. That should be a sign for the automatic defenses to prevent that. Or users are only able to log in with signed devices, so devices that the organization owns. Those are other ways, but yeah, you have to create layers of defense and assume that humans are flawed. That's a base assumption, and when you have that assumption, you can create different ways of protecting yourself that include that a user might click, there might be faulty code, there might be faulty defenses, and you have to threat model your key applications to take that into consideration.
That's what what we call defense in depth, basically, right?
Yeah.
Just because we know for sure that there's no such thing as 100% security. Like you're nothing and no one can really assure you that this specific attack surface can never be breached. You have always to assume, okay, this defense can actually be breached, so I need another layer behind that, and possibly another layer, so that if the second layer falls as well, I have the third one, right? So for sure we need, I don't know, to train people to recognize the phishing attacks and everything. But we are humans, so everyone can actually fall for it. So you need to try to, I don't know, as we mentioned before, scan the email before it actually reached the user to find any evident, let's say, malicious, indicator. And after that, you try to block any unknown executables that could be downloaded by the user by mistake. And as you mentioned, block any uncommon domains and so on and so forth. So it's actually about having really multiple layers, multiple levels, so that one bake the other, right? When one is not working for any reason, or just one is breached, because attackers are doing that. Attackers are researching to evade those security measures. They know, of course, that organizations are putting in place multiple measures. They're just looking for new ways of fooling them. And that's the reason that, unfortunately, companies have to, put in place all of those different solutions, all of those different technologies, which means efforts, which means budget, which it, says a lot about why it is difficult to defend organizations, right? Why it's not that easy, because you need, multiple skills, so multiple people with different skill set, multiple technologies, so the money to afford all of those resources, like people and also technologies. It's really says a lot, and says a lot about the people that have to take responsibility for that, right? Like I just, this is really a little out of context here, but I was thinking, when an organization actually gets breached because something about like this, right? And someone at some point has to like explain, right, to the board or to the management why we were breached. Okay, it's not always that simple. It's just because, it's true that we can always improve, right? But it's not always someone's fault or something's fault because that technology is not good or the other technology was not good. It's just that anything can be exploited, right? Both humans, both technologies, and everything. So yeah, it's like a never-ending story in some way.
It
Kind
it, it is. And the larger target you are, the more you have to take into consideration of that threat actors are going to find ways to try to attack you. But that doesn't mean that if you're small, that you don't take these into consideration either, because they could send this QR code to any Office 365 account. They're 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 gonna try to do it in mass. So they're not just gonna try to attack. In the beginning, they're gonna try small accounts to test that it works before they get to the large accounts. And then, as you saw by the July spike, they started to go en masse. So they probably weren't as targeted in
Mm,
who they're trying to get, but rather trying to get as many people as possible.
sure. Like there are both really very very targeted attacks which are looking for a specific organization and of course if you are a very big, very exposed, very public one, you should be concerned about that. At the same time, there are all of those, very massive attacks looking to breach as many organizations as possible, even just one user per each organization. And that's still like um, reaching the attacker objective, right?
Mhm.
So unfortunately, no one is safe in this world. Um, so Chris, if you're okay with it, I think I'm gonna move on with the next news. I think we
Okay.
pretty much discussed about everything about this. There will always something more. So I just suggest to the people watching this to have a look at the news yourself and maybe let us know if you have any other comments or just different opinions because I don't know everything. Chris doesn't know everything, and there's always someone that can contribute to the discussion. I think that's the real value behind this project. If you contribute to the discussion, I will definitely appreciate it. So feel free to leave a comment anywhere, and I will go read it and possibly take into consideration the next time I face something like this. Great. So next news. This time we talk about LinkedIn, the very, I would say, pretty famous social network related to the work context, right? Job offerings and stuff like that. So I've seen this pretty much discussed in the last days. Um, and it's actually there are no much details unfortunately, but the point is that multiple different LinkedIn accounts have been basically breached, and multiple users have seen their accounts to be blocked or suspended without being able to access them anymore from a day to the other. And it appears to be a pretty massive attack because we have, I think, yeah, you can see here that the not the newspaper, but the news site just had a look at the how many researches queries on Google were searching for LinkedIn hacked or everything, and apparently it there was a pretty big rise in the last few days, over 5,000%. So not bad at all. And so I think there are a couple of things that are interesting about this. First of all, it's interesting to try to think why a LinkedIn profile could be a target for some threat actors. Why? Like, of course there are multiple ones, but I'm curious to see, to hear what's your opinion about this, because I think definitely there could be different ways they could exploit like a LinkedIn profile. Let's say a generic one, right? Of course it depends on who is the user.
Yeah, so there's multiple reasons for attacking LinkedIn accounts, and from the news stories, the reason why there isn't that much about it is that it appears that you're using leaked credentials or brute force credentials, and the accounts didn't seem to have any multi-factor authentication attached to it. So As we previously discussed, having that second layer of an authentication is very important. And in some of the upcoming stories, we're going to even get even more fine grain as to the specific type of second factor authentication that you should use. But just for here, let's recommend very strong passwords. If you haven't changed your password for LinkedIn recently, and it's the original one that you've had for years, please change it. LinkedIn has had several breaches over the past 10 years. And most often, if you're human, if you're not security conscious, you never change your password from the time you signed up unless they force you to. So, good reminder, go change your password now and make it a strong password, because you're using brute force. So, what brute force is you're trying as many password combinations as possible to try to get in and to get your account. Now, when they have your account, there's several things that they could do from it. One, they can spread malware, phishing, scams via direct messages. They can also spread misinformation or send you to scam sites via direct post. For example, there's been several ones where you have someone from Pepsi or Coke or something saying something about Elon Musk, and then you're going to want to go research it. That's why having these accounts taken over are helpful. But on the back end, if you get an employer account now, and you create a job posting, or you're able to say, hey, I'm looking to create this job posting, and you have lots of people send you all their information because they want to get a job. Now you're using it to get that information. So LinkedIn tends to be a more trusted site compared to, say, Twitter for job information, because that's what most people go to that platform for. So accounts tend to be more highly valued. Additionally, you tend to trust your connections inherently more than you do someone that you follow on Twitter,
Yeah.
because more often than not, you've researched these people, you've seen, okay, well, they've worked at these companies, they're connected to these people that you're also connected to. And if you haven't gone out and just randomly connected to a bunch of people, there's that layer of trust built into who you're connected to. So having those accounts then taken over, that trust is now gone. Um, yeah. So those are my main thoughts.
Yeah. Like, I was not actually thinking about the company profiles, right? Just slipped from my mind, but it's actually very, very interesting. Like, I'm thinking about every, I would say, in every industry, every job advertisement on LinkedIn immediately gets hundreds or of applications, right? And not only, like, just to add a bit to what you said before, not only it will be a concern to share your data, right, with compromised accounts, so with actually with the attackers, because you're giving them your curriculum vitae with all of your data in it and everything. But I'm also thinking uh, many job descriptions actually get a link that you have to click on and provide your information directly on the company website, right? So what about, and we kind of return to what we the previous news here, what about I actually put a malicious link in there, right?
Yeah.
And just because, okay, it's a job description, I need a job, so I'm not gonna think twice about this, and this is a very good company I want to work for, so I'm gonna click the link without reading it, without checking whether it's actually the company domain or any other legit domain, and possibly that link is actually going to install something on my computer without me noticing, right? Or
Well, it
maybe.
could install something on your computer, but many companies don't have their their applicant tracking system on their domain.
Sure.
They will use another company, and there's so many companies that are now coming out as applicant tracking systems. You don't know if you're submitting to a real applicant tracking system or a fake one. You're trusting that there's that inherent trust again that you're putting in the account and that you're legitimately from this company and that this applicant tracking system that they sent you to through this link that you clicked on is legitimately that. And you provide considerably more information and potentially
Mhm.
more private information in a job application than you ever would in a regular phishing site.
Yeah, just because you expect to get something, if you do that, right? i'm
Exactly.
um I'm going to put my information there because I expect the company to give me like an interview and eventually maybe hire me so they can pay me. So definitely you have an objective and you are open to do more things, unfortunately. So yeah, that's definitely pretty scary. And as I said, I was not thinking about that. And still, it's all about the thing that if you get access to a known LinkedIn profile, any company or actual user, still it's all about the fact that it's trustworthy. Right, you mentioned this already, but the point is that you can, of course, create just a fake profile, right, and try to perpetrate your attack with that fake profile. But it's just not the same. Just not the same if I actually send you that malicious link from your former colleague from your former company, right? Because you knew each other, you trust them, and you think, okay, that guy is not gonna send me anything bad, right? And you also said that probably LinkedIn is also somewhat more trustworthy than other social networks. Like, I think it really depends on how you use the platform, right? Because if you use it at the same, in the same way you use all of the others, right, without really growing a network of people you already know, but just connecting with everyone, of course it's a bit different. Still, you can definitely get more easily to certain people, right? If you are perpetrating a targeted attack, right? If you really want to reach that specific person or just that specific employee from that specific company, right? Because maybe let's say you are targeting a sysadmin, right? From the company you are targeting, because they have privileged accesses, right? If you get to steal their credentials, of course you're gonna get a very you know um, very good level of access at your target company, right? So let's not forget that um, people on LinkedIn means also employees of a series of companies, and you can try to target a person to then jump on their corporate accounts, right? Because if I compromise your account and like your computer as I don't know, saved credentials on your browser for both your personal accounts but also your company accounts, I can still automatically get access also to um, some of the company resources, right? So this could be both, let's say, an attack targeting individual people and or actually targeting company themselves. I was thinking about this because actually the news here somewhere specifies that some of the users received some kind of ransom note, like if you want to get access back to your account, you need to pay me something, right? And that makes me think, okay, this was actually targeting individual users, just another massive attack. I breach as many user profiles as possible and try to convince them to pay me something. So overall, it's a successful attack. But I guess that if the attackers also get some very interesting profile, they can further expand their scope, right? Maybe they can achieve to actually compromise a company or a list of companies, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It really depends on what type of accounts they get and what you're looking to do with it. It shows in the article that some of these are coming from Russian URLs. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're from Russia, but
Hmm.
um, if it is from Russian URL, there could be misinformation. There could be all sorts of other attacks that they're using for it. So, um, yeah, it it begs to think that if they are Russian threat actors here, what they could be doing with it.
Yeah, I was actually reading while you were talking about it, and basically, at least some of the users who were compromised, they observed their accounts to be in their email addresses connected to their accounts to be replaced, right? So basically the attacker finds a way to compromise your account and get access to your account. Then it wants to keep the access and forbid you to get the access back. So they change the email addresses associated with it, this time using apparently a Russian provider, rambler.ru. I'm not sure like what kind of service that is. So it could be one of those very simple and quick providers that do not ask you any information to create a new account, right? That will be very common. And I read somewhere else that not only, yeah, it's actually here. Not only they change the email address, but also if you didn't already, they turn on the MFA, which is some sort of paradox, right? You should use MFA to prevent this kind of attacks, and they are actually attackers are actually using this to prevent you to take your account back, right? And when you do that, this can get difficult when you reach out to the provider, to LinkedIn in this case, and just ask, I cannot access to my account because there's MFA. Like, how do you guarantee that that's actually your account? You're not just trying um, trying to fool the support to give you access to another account, right? It gets difficult and it slows down you to recover your account. People get mad, of course, and the company image, like again in this case LinkedIn, does not get a good image out of this, right? Because it's also affecting LinkedIn itself because of this massive attack, right? Uh, I think very often people in the security industry do not consider the image damage, right, concerning security attacks. Like, you can recover, you can um, continue to do business after the attack, hopefully, but the image damage is something that just doesn't go away, right? Maybe that guy is not going to use LinkedIn anymore because it felt very bad about this experience, right? And it um, just blame LinkedIn itself. Maybe it's not really the best thing to do, but still you get somewhat of a bad experience out of it, right?
Yeah, reputational damage is
Yeah.
definitely something to consider. And I just like to say, there, guys and girls, and everyone out there, yes, reputational damage from threat actors is something to consider, and I've I've started to include that in my threat profiles, in my threat modeling, that they can use this sort of attack for reputational damage. So that's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is also something that, um, again, yet another thing that is difficult to probably communicate to the management of a company, right? That is not only about how bad it was or how much data was exfiltrated or how money we lost in the very moment we were breached, but also how many users are we going to lose because of this if we didn't manage the communication very well and everything. That's all a series of aspects that are not really technical, right? Or at least not technological, let's say, and really probably require other business units to be involved in responding to an incident. I'm thinking about you know communication and marketing in communicating to the public or to the users what it happened and be transparent and just not pretend nothing happened and so on and so forth, right? It's an aspect that I don't see considered as often as the technological one.
Yeah, and in addition to those that you mentioned, there's the fact that we're talking about it, so it's on the news. But
Mhm.
then by the fact that if this then goes to regional news or national news, wherever these companies are based, that puts intense pressure on investors as well
Mm.
as others. So, yes, reputational considerations should be taken into account.
Yeah, and just to uh, you know reiterate on this or stress out a bit, there's a quotation in the article that is quoting a user that was reached in this way, and it's saying about leaking, what a joke of a company because it's struggling to get access back to his user, right? It's not really, and it's really human to do so, right? To not blame the actual attackers, but the company because it's taking time to recover, which is
Yep.
understandable actually, right? At least if you are in the industry, if you are one of the people facing the incident from the inside. So yeah, definitely very very interesting. Now I think we can again move on with the next news. With the You were right before, it's actually could be somewhat connected to this because we're going to talk about MFA as well. Just before we do it, just want to remember people that again you're watching this on Twitch. We are live together with Chris Foulon today, but I'm going to re-upload the video on YouTube, re-upload the audio on Spotify and other platforms. And if you like this, if you want more people to be invited in this format, maybe if you want Chris to return once again, please let us know. Just with a very little feedback, hit that subscribe button or follow button, or just share it with your friends if you think they're gonna like it as well. And just let us know if you have any feedback to improve this, because that's also for you, right? I definitely getting some very insightful discussions while doing this, so I'm doing pretty good. But if this gives value to you as well, just let us know. It will be much appreciated. So next news, um, we're going surely to talk about MFA, and the actual core of the story is the Lapsus group, which is a pretty well known, I would say, um, threat actor group uh, that has been focusing on a recent campaign on the SIM swapping technique and actually getting a little, creative in using this kind of technique. So what we are talking about, I always like to get a little of context here. SIM swapping, it's just, and Chris, correct me if I think I'm wrong somewhere, but it's just a technique where you try to steal the telephone number, right, of some users, of some people, um, moving that number to a new SIM card that you are just registering from scratch and registering that as at your name, right? So that you actually own that SIM card and that phone number, and you start receiving the phone calls that are supposed to reach the original user, right? Uh, Phone calls,
Yes.
SMS, and whatsoever. And this is very, very interesting, especially recently, because we were talking about MFA before, right? Multi-factor authentication, where you basically not only put your username and password to get access to your account, whatever social network or other account, but you're also requested to insert a code that you receive on a different medium, right? That different
Correct.
medium can be an SMS to your phone number. And basically what happens when someone steals your phone number, right? Usually attacker are should struggle with MFA because they have to steal you two different things: your password and also your other factor of authentication, right? And if they can easily, or I will say more easily, steal your passwords compared to the other factor, with something like SIM swapping, if you are using SMS as a medium for multi-factor authentication, they can actually definitely access to your account in that way, right? So they actually get the SMS instead of you on their new SIM card, and they just put the one-time code in the application instead of you. So it's actually pretty interesting, even if this is not a very new technique, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think here what they're trying to show is that with SIM swapping, now they've gone to as um, extort larger companies. So
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning, it used to be that these SIM swaps happened because individuals had um, a one letter Twitter handle or a gaming handle or maybe something monetary. So they had it attached to cryptocurrency. And then as multi factor authentication gained in popularity, companies thought, well, what's the second thing that everyone has? A phone.
Yeah.
So they then started to implement um, sending SMS based messaging as it's the second easiest way to have people type in a multi-factor authentication from to try to authenticate their device. The problem is you had to social engineer a carrier. So now they're attacking carriers at mass. And unfortunately, T-Mobile has been one of the carriers that has been um, attacked at mass several times. And they've been in the news several times for breaches. And they're in this story, they're showing that they're taking a back end approach. So rather than attacking um, T-Mobile directly, they're using a law enforcement approach to where they're using a DHS review board type approach to gain access to the victim's phone number through this law enforcement request, and it's called emergency disclosure request, and you're requesting to get all the victims' information from the source. So rather than try to hack the account, they go, why don't we just try to hack the source and use these emergency disclosure requests or EDRs and just get all this information from the victim's phone company
Mm.
and get their SIM at the same time. So they're going directly to the source, getting that, and then now they're using it to exploit larger companies. They're attacking Microsoft as well. They're attacking Ubisource. They're attacking Samsung. All these companies by using the power of SIM swaps.
It's a sort of let me know if you agree with this, but it's a sort of supply chain attack, right? When you are targeting the, in this case, the individual person owning the phone number, but to do that, you first try to compromise the actual, service provider that is granting you the phone number, right? So that I first compromise your provider, and then I can steal your phone number in that way. So it's not something we call it in this way usually, because usually we refer to that with organizations, right? But still, it's the same kind of concept.
Yeah, exactly. These are now more high-end targeted attacks. You don't tend to do a SIM swap attack for everyone.
Yeah.
These tend to be a lot more targeted. So someone that they suspect that has a high value of assets that they would be able to compromise if they were able to swap the SIM and get to those victims' attacks, which they show the chain of how they approach it in the article.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm thinking about what's the difference between maybe the first attempts, right, back then, of SIM swapping. At least like in my country, I remember that there was a lacking of authentication by the service providers. So right, basically anyone could just go at any telco store and request, oh,
Hmm.
I need to a new SIM for my phone number, and the employees were not really requesting much, ID cards or anything to authenticate the person, and just give them a SIM card, just because it was never a problem before. It was never an issue before they started to use it pretty pretty massively. Uh, right now, it's a bit better. Right now, telcos are required to strictly authenticate people when requesting a new SIM card, right? But still, it is mentioned in the article a few ways they can still make the providers get a new SIM card just using this, yeah, emergent disclosure request it is referring to. I believe it's some sort of you know um, uh, special request that maybe law enforcement can do for some special cases, right? And they, attackers just impersonate law enforcement in this case to send this special request. Or if you just find a way to compromise an internal access to the internal tools of the service provider, right? And you are actually you know basically the person running those operations, you can just do it yourself, right? Or you have an insider in the telco provider, right? And you just ask your buddy at the telco, can you please do this for me, right? So there are still different ways they can perpetrate this. And again, the problem here is mostly because of SMS used as a medium for MFA, because MFA can be anything. Just stands for multi-factor authentication, so it's just an additional right factor to the actual credentials. So SMS was one of the first ones, and is still pretty common nowadays. But I think that the best suggestion today will be to use an app, right? There are different providers. They just get you the one-time code through an app instead of the SMS. Or you can have also the actual hardware token, right, where the provider release you a physical, right, new device that the only purpose of this device is just to get you those codes. So those two different factors could be a little, more safe than the SMS, and probably, just I'm not sure I want really to suggest companies to stop permitting their users to use SMS, right? Because it's can be a big deal, right? Can be a big deal for users if they don't have, or I don't know, if my grandpa has to use an app in his phone instead of receiving an SMS, it's gonna be difficult for him, right? But still, at some point, we really need to drop that, because it's just not the safest way to do it, right? Especially as a security measure. But
Yeah,
other than that,
exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah. There's hardware tokens like YubiKeys as well. So
Mhm.
um, when using YubiKeys, you have a physical token that you purchased, and then you can use that for multiple purposes. It doesn't just have to be for one purpose. You can use it for one purpose, but you can also use it for multiple purposes. You can use a password manager. So there's the app, but then there's password managers that you mentioned that adds that extra layer of protection that you encompass your passwords on, which exists both in the online form as well as device only forms. So you can use those as well. And then below, they mention that some of the additional things that you're putting on the telephone providers, at least here in the US, to improve their measures to decrease the volume of SIM swapping attempts, especially for highly privileged actions and FBI government type
Yeah.
accounts.
Yeah, whenever you really handle, top secret data or just very sensitive information in general, it all relates to, your threat model, basically, right? Depends on the risk you are actually facing. The more sensitive are the data you handle, the more I would say um, riskier are the activities you are running as an organization, right? The more you have to put the level very high and try to use the best measures out there when you have different alternatives, right? Maybe for a smaller organization, which is not really running very critical operations, could be understandable that maybe just chooses the cheapest or the easiest measure that is available. But when you really, yeah, as you mentioned, when you have government environments, or you're just handling user data, very sensitive user data, maybe you should choose for higher measures. Like, I don't know, I still think that the app is still a good choice if you really cannot afford to give all of your YubiKeys or other hardware tokens, because there's a cost behind it. I recently had a discussion about it with some people at a conference, which is, of course, we know already the hardware token is the best choice nowadays, right? But what if a company has, thousands of employees, right? Or what if you are actually granting access to your customers, not only to your employees? You cannot just really randomly send everyone, potentially, to million of or even more of users hardware tokens to get access to your application. There's a cost, and it's actually, you know still getting a new level of mm, how do you say, difficulty, let's say, on the user interaction with the application. It's not the most usable thing out there, right?
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, I would agree with you. I started out my career in help desk, and all I can think about is um, how would I roll out hardware tokens to millions of people? There's the customer service involved. There's the, like you said, helping your grandpa in how to sign up his account. And then when you use a hardware token, it's usually limited to a physical computer, so usually not a mobile phone. There's some of them that do work with mobile phones, but those are even more expensive. So yeah, going through that in my head is like, oh, that's really hard to do.
yeah. What about if the user actually loses its hardware token, and it gets to be replaced? So you just don't have to buy one per each user, you have to have a backup, right?
Yep.
And how do you treat how do you treat the lost hardware key? You need to, disable that, otherwise someone else can find it and reuse it. So it's very, very, tricky. It's very, very difficult. I think that probably very few organizations out there can use it on a massive context. Maybe for very very small context with access to a very specific application, a very specific database of information, and with few people involved. But when it gets to thousands, millions, or even more, uh, I think it's still a little prohibitive nowadays. It needs to be a little easier, so maybe we will have other alternatives that will be cheaper and easier in the future. Who knows?
Well, like you mentioned earlier, there if you have multiple layers of control, you can move to something like a passwordless approach to where you don't really need a hardware token, but you would still use the hardware token for your sysadmins, your highly privileged accounts within your organization. But once you start going to the customer level, it does become a little bit harder to require customers to use hardware tokens.
Absolutely. It's actually very interesting, the approach where you differentiate between your, all of your users, and try to understand what are the most concerning, or just the most critical ones. As you mentioned, the admins, for example, right? Uh, Hopefully you don't have the same amount of admins and normal users out there. So there will be a few people to provide with another token. Uh, Unfortunately, I don't see that very often, right? Even if that's probably something that is feasible, right? Just collect, which is something you should do anyway. Just collect the list of your admins, collect the list of your privileged users, and make sure that there's a proper way to authenticate them, right? um, that's feasible, and also should be a thing to aim for, I would say, at least for some organizations out there, at least for the bigger ones.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, great. Okay, so I think we can go through the very last story we have today. Again, I really hope that if you are liking it, liking this, you really take your time to hit that subscribe button or follow button if you're on Twitch, or whatever you prefer to spread the word. Um, anyway, we're going to the very end, unfortunately, of this episode. With this news that is actually a little, just a little older compared to the other ones, but I still thought it was very interesting to talk about, and a little more related to, I would say, privacy and data protection instead of strict cybersecurity. But it could be involving so many people out there, and I really think that explaining a little bit more about this can be really, really useful. So the news is about Zoom, so the very well-known company behind the meeting application, right? That you can just use to have remote sessions with your colleagues or customers or everything, which was very discussed in many news in the last years because of security in general. And yet another, here's another update on this. Um, the fact is that they just updated their I would say privacy policy, or not. Yeah, it's actually their terms of service, right? Basically, that document that the first time you use a software, they show you to make you understand what are the implications of using that software, right? Because it's probably, I would say, mandatory in most of the countries out there to just clarify what is the purpose and what are the implications of software usage. And there are, of course, also privacy implication, like what the company is going to do with the data you're putting inside the application itself, right? How that will be processed, with who it will be shared, and so on and so forth. Now they made I will I will not say a tiny update, but an interesting one, definitely, right? Where they specified, that all of the data related to your communication using Zoom. So basically, the audio, the video, and possibly also the transcription of what you are saying, because there are features that are basically they're called speech to text. So just taking your audio can transcript what you are saying and putting uh, you know um, in clear text. And they're actually providing features because they can put captions under your webcam when you are speaking in real time, so people can actually read. So it's done on purpose to provide some features. Anyway, all of this information, Zoom declares right now, can also because it's in addition on what they were doing also before, it can also be used to train AI models, right? And this was really making the news very, very big out there, right? Just the thing that um, the same data that you were already sharing yesterday using Zoom, right? Now if we're not using Zoom, it could be different. But if you were using Zoom yesterday, you were already sharing some data, and the company was already using it for many different reasons, right, that were mentioned there. But right now they are specifying, okay, we also have some AI models we are training inside the company, and we are using our customer data to train them to be better, and potentially to provide, I would say, better services to their customer base. But it was not really took as a good thing by the public, I would say. No.
No,
It,
I would say you're having everyone's concerned with the way that their data is being used and the change in terms and conditions, um, both that they could be used for AI usage, as well as the way it was presented. It wasn't presented very clearly. It was like, oh,
yeah.
terms and conditions have been updated, and click OK. Right button. Yeah, click that one. Don't read the terms and conditions in the grayed out button. Um, and most people are going to go click OK, yeah, whatever, update the terms and conditions without even understanding what it was doing. You're going to do it. And why this is a concern is because this covers both the paid and unpaid customers. So,
Mm,
as a company that uses Zoom, this becomes a scary situation if Zoom can just say, oh, well, we're just going to update our terms and service. think of a company that is now using Zoom to talk about their company secrets, but
Hmm.
they need to use Zoom AI for narration, for closed caption for their company employees. They have to use Zoom's AI service for the closed caption, and then now it's going to be used for something else. So that's a very, from a company standpoint, that's an extremely disturbing change in terms and conditions, especially if I were a larger company that is using Zoom. That would make me switch already. Um, and it said it will. One of the disturbing facts is earlier it mentioned that it would offer ways to back out, but there's no clear, easy way to back out of allowing Zoom to use this, even though they say they can. Um, and I, now that you say it, I'm actually going to go see in my Zoom portal if I can back out of it. So let's test this live.
That's great. So once again, I think the biggest problem is the way they actually communicated this, right? Because it was not transparent. It was actually probably a little misleading, right? Maybe there was even some dark pattern in there. So if you don't know, dark patterns are just ways to, implement some software processes to make the user do something instead of another thing, even if there's an option, right? So in this case, even if you should and could read the terms of service, you had a very big light and um, highlighted button just to click OK and make it disappear without reading it, right? Instead of just putting the terms of service in front of you, it make the user read it, and just after read it, click on the button to close the window. So I think that was probably the biggest problem there. But now I just want to be like you know I'm thinking out loud. If a company, like you mentioned before, um, is concerned about sharing data with third parties, right, and using messaging apps or meeting apps like Zoom to talk about internal information or sensitive information, I think that was an issue even before this update, right? Because you're still using a third party, you're still have limited, let's say, knowledge about how the data is actually processed, right? You can ask directly to Zoom, okay, I have these requirements, so you have to make it clear what are you going to say. But there will always be some updates on how they process data. And if again, if we're already talking about the government and top secret data, you probably should not use this at from the very beginning, or at least this is my opinion, right? Now I'm really wondering how the AI changes the game here, right? So will you be more concerned, like
I would be
as
more
a company?
concerned. I would be more concerned because
Okay.
before, if you when you had the potential to see the information, it was a human seeing it. Um, but they still allowed, back in 2020, they allowed end-to-end encryption, which in theory took Zoom out of the picture. But
Yeah.
now, if you're allowing, if you didn't have that, it would be a human that would be allowed to go into the chain, and there wasn't that machine um, logic that's going in there and seeing how users are interacting, how
Mm-hmm.
users are sharing information. Now you have the potential for an AI model to react to, oh, if you ask the users to click an emoji, how many of them click? And if you can now and see that at scale, you can now, like you mentioned, dark patterns, find ways to get users to click on things the way you want it. Yeah, that does become concerning.
Yeah, so you mean it's basically because this gets bigger, right? It can
Yes.
process more data. It can extrapolate more from the same data than just a human being, right? I think that's your point, and it's
Yes.
it's
That.
very
Yes.
yeah, it's very understandable. Definitely agree with that. Point of view. The thing here is that um, there's just uh, more power behind how they can use the same data they already had access before, right? So yeah, perfectly understandable. I wonder if this same concern is clear in everyone's mind, or it's also right. Maybe the experts and people in the industry, I would say, they can reach the same conclusion. But what about all of the others that could be just let's say just a little scared about all of this AI stuff so far because it's still not a clear, you know, um, uh, thing that no one is really, or at least few people are still really understanding it, right? And it's scary by itself because it's the AI, right? Um, do you think that could be something that actually happens from the general public?
I think yes, there is fear of what AI can do and what AI modeling can do. The other thing is because people have seen some of the implications of AI use. Let's jump back to Cambridge Analytica and the ability to fine tune how you can use individuals' data to manipulate information. Yes, it does become a concern. Um, you have companies that are using AI in many different ways, from you don't know if this whole stream is AI,
Of
because
course.
there's ways to have fake avatars. There's ways to turn text into speech, um, and manipulate the information in different ways. So yes, there is a fear out there, and Zoom is a audio visual service, and if you have enough of someone's audio and their video, it becomes easier to recreate them. So,
Okay.
for example, you've seen the deep fakes of um, Tom Cruise doing
Mm,
all sorts of weird things, or President Obama, or President Trump, or President Biden saying things that could cause something. Now, if you take it down to the level of being able to represent large companies, you could do insider trading, you can manipulate the stock market. There's a lot of consideration that goes into the disinformation that comes when all your information is fed into AI.
no, absolutely. This is very interesting. Now I'm, thinking out loud about a potential feature that tomorrow Zoom or other companies could provide, where you're actually using it to do your meetings right at work, and at some point Zoom can actually suggest you, okay, do you want to just fake this meeting and want your avatar to do the meeting instead of you, because we have enough of your data to actually replicate your face, your voice, and just do some I'm thinking some standard patterns, just be quiet for most of the meeting, and just give some feedback here and there, and you can replace yourself in these meetings. That's very scary, especially at least from a security guy, right? Because you also think, if a company does that, what happens if someone breaches that company and can some way steal the avatar capability? So that's really
Well,
crazy.
they already do. So right now in Zoom they have avatars. They're not as real looking, but
Hmm.
they're real enough that they'll use the camera reaction to move the avatar.
Huh.
Um, and once you combine that with a threat actor that really wants to do this, the outcomes are pretty concerning. Now, back to Zoom using it or another AI model using your information. Um, that's where the concern becomes is this company has been, especially through the pandemic, one of the major companies that a lot of people use. So if you trick people or use dark patterns to have people use this feature and you're not aware of it, that's where the concern is, right? It's less about that it's possible. It's more about how they did it.
Yeah.
The trick to, oh yeah, we just updated our terms and service, but didn't really say what the terms and services they changed was.
Yeah, there was also uh, even more, I would say, confusion added. If you scroll down to the news, the fact that they re-updated again the terms of service and included another statement that just says the opposite of what it's specified, just a little above. And no, we're not going to use your data for AI training, but it's exactly what is written, just few lines above that. Again, it's all about communicating. It's all about being transparent, and I still think uh, it's probably the impact to the public, it's bigger because of this. Because I'm also thinking about one last thing here. What about, we actually have a list of other companies behind services we use daily, that are already using AI, and they just not specify it anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's worse? It's worse Zoom that tried some way to communicate it, but it was very very bad at it, or just all of the other services that maybe we are trusting more right now, okay, after reading this news, that are already doing it but just not saying it. And they still have access to the data. They still are processing it in a very concerning way, let's say. So really, communication, I think, changes everything, right? Even if something is really happening, just the fact that you're not really aware of it changes the way you consider those services and those companies, and maybe it changes the choice on which service to use at some point, especially if they are competitors. Don't you think
Yeah,
so?
yeah, I say it's better to clearly communicate it. Um,
Mhm.
I I'm a fan of trying to see how I can use technology best to help my listeners of breaking into cybersecurity. Um, so I'm always out there trying to see how we can use AI safely, right?
Mhm.
But if you're open about it, that's the key. Um, Zoom has had a pattern of um, miscommunications,
Yeah.
of changing their approach. So this fumble again just brings concern to them,
Yeah.
especially in this case where they have such access to your data already.
Yeah, it's not like the individual event that we are talking about right now, but it's like an history, right, of things that happened before that already put some concerns on, security savvy or just privacy oriented people. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Chris, I don't know you. We already spent around 1 hour and a half on this. It flight to me because it was really, really interesting and insightful. Definitely got to talk about so many things in in a very small amount of time. So I really thank you so much to have joined me, and I thanks everyone that have watched us today, but also that we will watch this same episode on YouTube and or Spotify. um, yeah, I really hope there we will have another chance to redo this again in the future. In the meanwhile, yeah, thank you very much. Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yep, it was a great conversation. Thank you so much. I do have to jump over to another one,
Sure.
but thank you everyone for listening. Join me on Breaking into Cybersecurity. Join your local InfraGard community if you're in the US, and support the whole Cyberhuman initiative where we help veterans come from their military career and join their civilian career with open source resources. Thank you all very much. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you again, and have a nice day, week, or whatsoever. Bye, everyone.